Okay, I just wanted to come on quickly because I just came across this tweet thread by Ian, otherwise known as Iron Hands 57 on X, that well lines up with a lot of my experience for how to get big in shape, looking good or whatever after age 40. So what he says here, comprehensive guide for guys over 40, really could be younger also. Yes, it could. None of this stuff is necessarily exclusive to dudes over 40, but it certainly does help us. And some of it may not apply to, as he says, to younger dudes. And he says, to achieve the real ideal dad bod, jacked and tan, there is no magic secret here, but sometimes it helps just to have it all laid out, he says, thread. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly. I'm not going to make a big, long production out of this because I thought it was pretty cool. I did a React video just yesterday. I think I just put it out, and I see it's just starting to take off a tiny bit on YouTube. So appreciations for that. Thank you very much. It's kind of fun to see that stuff actually hits. So I guess we'll do another one. Why not? All right, here we go. So you see, you get an idea who this guy is. I don't know him personally or anything. He's California natty, and you'll see in this thread that means not natty, obviously. So if you're horrendously morally opposed to the not natties among us, scroll on by. But there's probably some good stuff in here regardless. And you can see he's obviously got a bit of size on him for a guy his age, for anyone, quite frankly. Older guy, I'm going to bet he's older than I am. I'm not really sure. And that could be casting stones. All right. So let's go back to the thread. All right. First up, he said, I was asked by a friend of mine who I haven't seen in years what I have been doing to get in shape. This is a guy in his 40s, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and trains regularly. Also, he's fairly healthy, but wants to up his aesthetic game. I gave him the short rundown, but told him I would follow up in more detail. Figured I would share here also. So here we go. And this is where right away I start to agree. He says, first thing I suggest, and this is optional, but it may accelerate the progress, get your blood work done and check your hormone levels. If you're under 300 total testosterone, that's 300 nanograms per deciliter. It's a universal measurement. I think in Canada, we measure it slightly differently, but it doesn't matter. Translate it to whatever your local country uses. If you're under 300 nanograms per deciliter total T, you may qualify for TRT through your primary care physician, PCP, doctor, whatever you want to call it. I would recommend you do this. Really, if you're under 500 total test, I would recommend you hop on TRT. Obviously, that's not doctor advice. A friend of mine, won't name names, he got his T tested at some point a couple of years ago on my urging, and I think he was high 200s or low 300, and he's in his 50s, and his doctor said, you're fine. And I disagree. And he's got some weight he could lose. And while testosterone or TRT is probably not the place that you start to lose weight, if you're really grossly overweight, like you'll just aromatize a lot, convert T to estrogen a lot if you're not careful, if you're really overweight and you're taking T. Still, I think there's a way to do it that would certainly help you lose some weight. In any case, I mostly stand behind what Ian's saying here. I think starting with a blood test, check your hormone levels. You can't outwork low T. You just can't. You will not lose weight. You will not build muscle anywhere near as efficiently if you've got your hormones optimized. And really what that means, there are different reference ranges for each age and depending on who you ask, but I typically think anywhere from 300 to 900 nanograms per deciliter is pretty much that broad range. If you're super physiological, if you're taking above TRT levels of testosterone, it's not uncommon for dudes to be like 2, 3, 4,000 nanograms per deciliter or beyond, which is bonkers. But anyways, we won't talk about that right now. He goes on to say there are many ways to achieve this, and it is affordable. If you're not seeing the progress and you want and are pretty active, this will improve the outcome. TRT he's talking about, and he's right. If you are just always tired and don't feel like you have the energy to work out, this will fix that. Again, for sure, if you want to remain natural, skip this step. Yeah. The other thing is it will dramatically help your recovery, TRT, because the exogenous nature of TRT or testosterone administered via a needle versus just endogenously produced from your nuts is that it's stable. It's 100% rock solid stable all the time. It's not your testosterone levels are not going to flag because you're stressed, because you didn't sleep well, because you drank a lot. All those reasons all those ways you can tank your natural test production do not apply. So that's why you're able to just perform in more than one sense of the word, every day in the gym and need much less recovery. Anyways, because you have that steady drip of testosterone. So moving on to diet. Next thing to dial in is diet. I'm just going to read this first and then I'll give you my 2 cents. He says, I recommend keeping it pretty simple. No crazy fad diet. Figure out your caloric needs based on current size and activity level. Then eat about 300 to 500 calories a day below that number. This is very similar to what I said before. If you are pretty overweight, you might even go a bit higher than that. Absolutely. But it's not needed. You really want to try to keep your calories as high as possible for as long as possible and still lose weight between 1 to 2 pounds a week, maybe more if you're supplementing, and maybe more if you weigh a lot. Obviously, if you're really grossly overweight, you're going to lose more weight initially for sure. And the thing about 300 to 500 calories a day as a deficit, and that certainly if you can hit that consistently, great. But what I find is it doesn't give you much buffer for when you do screw up. So you think about this over the course of 7 days, if 6 of those days I eat at 300 calorie a day deficit, so now I have an 1800 calorie deficit at the end of day 6. If I go even marginally off the rails, I guess it's not too marginal. You believe me, 1800 calories is literally a Ben and Jerry's tiny thing of ice cream. Ask me how I know that. If you can do a bigger deficit, it means that you're giving yourself a more cheat room. If you need to cheat, you've got it and you can take it. So that's something to keep in mind. All right. He says macros will basically look like this: 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I've said this before. He says if you're really heavy, use your ideal body weight. So that's true. So if you're 300 pounds, you should not be trying to eat 300 grams of protein per day. I do know some bodybuilders that do that, but that they have like muscle weight to get close to 300 pounds. So if you're 300 pounds and you're trying to get down to 240, 220, whatever, eat 220 grams of protein a day. Keep your fat below 50 grams a day, minimum 150 grams of protein a day. Yep. Fill the rest of your allowance with clean carbs. Absolutely. Rice and potatoes are your best friends here. Most of your meals should consist of things like chicken breast / rice or steak and potato. Keep it simple and avoid added fats. I don't share the same aversion to fat. I really think that if you're hitting your protein macro, you can do whatever the heck you want with the rest of the macros, because I don't like making it too hard on people. Really, if you're getting that protein macro and you're at a calorie deficit, you've only got so many remaining calories with which to play with anyways. You can't go too far off the rails. If your deficit gets you to like, I don't know, 2,200 calories a day, and then I suck at math, but let's say 200 of them, times 4, 800 of those calories are protein, then fantastic. The rest of them, spend them however you want. Okay, here we go. Here's the hard part. You need to accurately track your calories every day, every meal. It's not fun. But once you do this for a long enough period of time, you'll be able to eyeball things later. Just track. It works. There are tons of good apps, some free ones, some minimal cost. Track every piece of food, every drink, every sauce. Be overly diligent at the start. Absolutely. This will set you up for success. I promise you, if you have never done this, you will be shocked at how much you are actually eating and will very quickly realize why you are struggling to lose weight. This is so true. I think I've told this story before, but the very first time years ago when I got my Fitness Pal, I thought, this is great. I will now start recording everything I'm eating. It's going to be fantastic. And so I made my bowl of oatmeal at the beginning of the day, and I put stuff in it, healthy stuff, right? Like coconut flakes and some raisins and some little tiny bit of brown sugar. And afterwards, I added it all up and entered it into my Fitness Pal app. And it was close to 1,000 calories that I had just eaten for breakfast. That was the start of learning a lot of hard lessons about exactly how calorically dense some foods are and how we consistently overserve ourselves and underestimate the caloric content of what we eat. And the only way to learn that is to get yourself a food scale and to get yourself a calorie tracking app and just get super nerdy about it. And you got to record everything like sauces, any kind of drinks you're having that have a caloric base or caloric count to them. That's why I try not to drink my calories. So it's just not worth having to track that stuff, but do it and be really fastidious about it and don't lie to yourself. And then you'll see just what your challenge really is. All right, so here he goes. Most guys could start this process between 2,300 and 2,500 calories a day. So he's saying if you just wanted to benchmark somewhere to start, that would probably it. And that's why I think before I had said like 2,200 calories. Unless you're like really a big outlier, you're probably your calories are gonna come in somewhere around there as being like either your maintenance calories or your cut calories, or it's within spitting distance of that. So track your weight at least a couple times a week on consistent times and days. If you're trying to lose weight, I would recommend tracking it every morning. You get up, take a piss, stand on the scale, some consistent time like that, because I find the more data points I have, the more I can like figure out what's actually going on. And then if I'm not weighing myself enough, I might get discouraged when the scale doesn't reflect what I think it should. Whereas if I weighed myself a couple more times in between those 2 scale days that I chose in the week, I might have seen the trend and then, oh yeah, I ate too much last night and that's why it's up, whatever. So he says, once you stop losing 1 to 2 pounds a week, we will make an adjustment either by increasing activity or lowering calories. So that's right. You're going to start with the pretty standard minimal deficit and then adjust after that. Your body will acclimate to these caloric intake levels, and then only then will you start ratcheting it down 100 or 200 calories a week. My suggestion is always to, he says, my suggestion is always to increase cardio before cutting calories. Remember, you want to build muscle, so you need food as high as possible. Trust me, when you get deeper in the cut, you'll appreciate not dropping calories too low out of the gate. Yeah, pretty solid advice there. Whoops. All right, let's see. Cardio, he says, not my favorite, but this is a big mover for your body composition as well as just general overall health. The only cardio that I consider mandatory is walking zone 2. If you have other cardio activities, great, that's a bonus. You're still going to get your step count up. Zone 2 movement is where the fat melts, and it does not affect your ability to recover from the lifting you'll be doing. You will need to hit a minimum of 10,000 steps every day, get a tracker, and start doing it. Yeah, I'm fortunate. I live in a city. I walk a lot. This is not zone 2 cardio, but it will count as steps. So you're not going to get your heart rate. I guess you could be one of those real speed walking nerds or whatever around town, and that might get your heart rate up to into the zone 2 territory. Zone 2 territory is usually like around 120 beats a minute, 130, maybe as high as 140. Not really though. Basically 120 to 140. And what works for me here, I was doing the treadmill on a 15, anywhere from 10 to 15% incline. I found eventually there would be RSI issues, repetitive stress injuries on ankle tendons and stuff if I did too much cardio at too much of an incline on a treadmill. So the way to solve this is lower the incline, 10%, 7%, 8%, something like that. And then the other thing I did is I switched to the elliptical. The elliptical is just as good. I don't use the arm things, but it's just as good. It may even be better. You can crank the difficulty up there. It's no impact. It's not changing the angle on your feet at all. So that'll work too. You can get your heart rate up into where it's supposed to be. And he's right. Cardio is a big mover, but I would say if you're really the order he's put this in is the correct order. If you haven't dialed your diet, don't even bother with the cardio. One thing at a time. I'm like I am a big proponent of layering. You can't do all this all at once. You need to build these habits over time by layering them on. So once you've got the habit of eating properly, I'm sure you can do diet and cardio at the same time. I'm not saying you can't, but you're focus on nailing that diet, then focus on nailing the cardio. Like you can't do them all perfectly right out of the gate, is what I'm saying. So go easy on yourself to some extent and just bite off, metaphorically speaking, as much as you can chew at a time to get good at. And just once those things become habits, you can just stack them. The habit stacking stuff from like Atomic Habits, that book, I think I mentioned in a video the other day. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. He says, if your weight loss stalls or slows based on diet and current activity level, you're going to add a 30-minute walk to your day. Yeah, ideally, you live in an environment where walks are entertaining. I know when I've lived in the suburbs before, they're very boring because you don't see people, can't walk around to stores. There's just other houses, no judgment. Suburbs are also nice in a lot of ways, but it makes it harder. I remember like years ago dating a woman that she had on her weekly to-do board, go for a walk. She lived in the suburbs. And so I totally get that. If it's not a compelling environment to walk in, you're not going to walk in it. So anyways, he says, yeah, do the walk when you get home from work, right after dinner, nice, easy zone 2 pace. Again, I'm not sure, unless you're out of shape, how easy it's going to be to get to a zone 2 levels, 120 beats a minute or more. Just walking out in the world without looking like a freak, like a speed walking freak. Anyways, you can add more movement as necessary in 30-minute increments. At my peak cut, I was doing 1.5 hours of walking every day, broken up into 3 by 30-minute sessions. Yeah, once you get down to 2,000 calories, you really need to try not going much below that until the last few weeks. What he's describing here sounds a lot more like contest prep. I wouldn't. This is not overly sustainable. I don't think people can really do an hour and a half of walking every day if that's not your primary mode of getting around. I don't own a car, haven't for years because I live in an urban area. And so even this though, for me, might be a bit tough. I work from home, desk job, that kind of shit. So that's a bit of a tall order. He says, now my favorite part, the lifting. You need to be doing hypertrophy style training a minimum of 3 times a week. 4 is better. 5 is if you're a psycho and can recover adequately. The TRT helps here. Yeah, as I mentioned, recovery would help. That said, you can outstrip what your joints can handle quite easily if you're on super physiological levels of TRT, quote unquote. Don't ask me how I know that. Any program, he says, is fine as long as you are pushing at or near failure regularly. The workouts should last about an hour. They should consist of 5 to 7 movements with 2 to 3 working sets per movement, resting between 2 to 3 minutes between sets, or as long as it takes to work with proper intensity and within a rep or two of failure. This was actually my favorite part of his tweet thread here, because this is almost exactly how I train. I would say maybe I'm more like 4 to 6 movements, and more like at least probably 3 working sets. I've fooled around a lot over the years with like way more volume, but these days I'm basically at 3 working sets, 4 to 5 movements, and the rest, my timer goes between 2:30 to 3 minutes, because if I'm doing a small muscle group, I'm resting for 2:30, maybe even starting a bit. I get bored and I'm like, all right, it's been 2:15. I'm just going to go. But if I'm doing a large muscle group, then that's a 3-minute rest in between sets. And within a rep or two of failure, this is another thing where I think if you are not serious about training, you don't really understand what a rep or two within a or two of failure means. This is a million years ago, last fall, I made a video where I talked about learning what failure feels like. And so actually getting to the point where you can't, like, gun to your head, you can't press that bar anymore and someone has to lift it off of you, or you bail from under the squat and it just hits the safety bars and you got to crawl out from under it. It's worth understanding what failure is so you can know what within a rep or two of failure means. But otherwise, this is bang on. It's exactly what I would do for a program. There are plenty of coaches out there and free programs you can follow. I recommend getting help in this area sooner rather than later. The more you start to understand program design, the less you'll spin your wheels with slow or no results. Figuring out what failure feels like, oh wow, here we go, is the hard part. It absolutely is. But if you want to maximize gains, this is imperative. Consistency is what matters most. Do not miss. Make it non-negotiable. Lift heavy and as often as you can recover from. So yeah, there's sort of 2 aspects to recovery. I am hardly ever sore from working out. People ask me this too. They're like, are you sore after working out? Soreness is not a measure of the efficacy of your workout. DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness, it doesn't mean you had a good workout necessarily. So really it's more, when you come back to the gym, can you still deliver solid effort? And like he said before, TRT definitely checks that box if you are on TRT. If you're natty, you definitely have to pay attention to, are you overtraining? If you're in there 5-6 days a week as a natty and you don't have a split of all the muscles you're training, you will probably gas out after a few weeks for sure. And then the other aspect, though, as I mentioned, is like joint and tendon and all that kind of health. Again, if you're not natty, if you're enhanced or whatever, if you're TRT, this is the thing that's probably harder to pick up on. It'll sneak up on you. The injuries will start to compound, and your body doesn't get these signals immediately. It's more of a cumulative fatigue where eventually you're like, oh man, my shoulder is now permanently screwed, and mine is. I'll have to figure out some surgical intervention on that soon. But anyways, that was a good one. He says the last 2, and we're almost to the end here. Thanks for this. It's gone on a little longer than I wanted it to, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. The last 2, I will actually want to say about this. I've used trainers a lot in my life for a lot longer than I needed to, probably. They're great. If you find a trainer that becomes your friend, it's hugely motivating. That's the reason you go in when sometimes you don't want to go in, if you can afford this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I think people overthink program design too much. You can take a lot of programs right off the shelf, as I think he said here, and just ride with them for a long time. People really overthink it and they're like, okay, it's been 2 months with this program, I need to switch to some other program. You don't. Like the meat and potato exercises are going to be what everybody knows: bench press, overhead press, squat, deadlift, dumbbell curls for biceps. Oh, geez, what am I missing? I'm missing something really obvious. Yeah, whatever. So you don't need to overthink it. And you don't need, as we talked about before, a huge amount even of these exercises. We're talking, like he says, 5 to 7 exercises a workout or movements a workout. I sometimes just do 4 or 5. Like that's mostly where I'm sitting. And that still takes an hour with those rests and everything built in, really going for it. So you don't need to overthink the program design too much, and don't lose track of things by you see all these goofy workouts online, and it doesn't make any sense. And for God's sakes, don't do those door opening things where you're holding a dumbbell out like that. Does nothing. Anyways, whatever. Getting sidetracked. He says the last 2 are real needle movers: hydration and sleep. You grow when you sleep. Make it a priority to get as much as possible. This will allow you to recover from the lifts more efficiently, rest harder. Water and electrolytes are crucial. You will lose more weight by keeping the belly full of water. It's true. Your hunger will not be as acute if you're full of water. Your joints will hold up better. Also true. Your skin will be better. Also true. Your muscles will look better. Absolutely true. If you're hydrated. Also, if you're carbed up, you will have a pump more easily. All right. Excuse me. Ugh. Let's just put you down right here. Okay. 60 ounces of water minimum. That is, how many liters is that? Oh gosh. Wow. I suck at this. Is that 2 liters? I don't know. When I'm properly hydrating, I drink 4 liters of water a day. When I'm improperly hydrating, probably 1 to 2. Do your best. It says it's really not hard. Ditch the soda, beer, coffee, etc. Just drink water, add liquid IV. Yeah. You know what? It's probably easier. Do what I do. I get a bunch of 0-cal soda, and I don't want to hear it about all the artificial sweeteners or whatever. I think it's more important to get a bunch of fluid in your body than worry about aspartame or whatever the hell the name of the artificial sweetener is in your 0-cal soda. Don't care. So yeah, that's one way to do it. And I drink a shit ton of coffee too. But actually, a little trick I do, because I love drinking coffee so much, I actually mix half decaf and half regular calf beans into my coffee machine. So I'm actually drinking half calf every coffee I make myself. So when I have 4 coffees in the morning, it's actually 2 coffees. So a little life hack there for you if you really love drinking coffee like I do. I just love the ritual of drinking a coffee. Okay, supplements, he says. This is what everyone thinks is the most important, but is actually the least. Obviously, I recommended TRT if needed. Beyond that, creatine daily, 10 milligrams, protein powder if you struggle to hit your macros, but don't let it bust your calories. Pre-workout is fine if you need the caffeine. If you want to get into the more advanced compounds, you should have all other areas of this figured out before you jump in to the heavier stuff. Lots of coaching available in this area also, but really food, cardio, lifting, sleep, and hydration is like 90% of the equation. The drugs are the extra 10%. Yeah, there's been a whole bunch of creatine talk on Twitter. I actually had to just mute the term creatine because it was getting out of control. Like every day, this one account he would go from one day saying, if you're not doing 10 milligrams of creatine, you're missing blah, blah, blah. And then the next day it was 20, and then it was 40. And I'm convinced it's just clickbait. It's absolute nonsense. But I have some creatine gummies, and I'll take like a handful of those every morning, and it comes to at least 10 milligrams. And I'm not afraid to just have a few more during the day. Who cares? Creatine is insanely safe. There's something like 500 peer-reviewed studies over time on its safety profile. And I only have 1 kidney, and I've obviously been through tons of doctors, and I get blood tests anywhere from every 1 to 3 months, and it's 100% fine. 100% fine. So you can OD, quote unquote, on creatine without even worrying about it. Okay, so he says, if you're a good bit overweight, I would recommend a GLP-1 type injection. This will help curb your appetite. So what he's talking about is like Ozempic, tirzepatide, I can't remember all the names, Mounjaro, all that stuff. And geez, the one that I'm actually still on to this day, let me just finish what he's saying here. This will help curb your appetite, and if done properly, teach you how to have a better relationship with food. It should not be something you do forever. It's a tool to be used while doing the work to change your life. Lots of vendors out there happy to steer you in the right direction, and lots of coaches for this as well. So I've been using retatrutide. You can see a couple of videos, or at least one I've posted on it. I did a shortcut and an extended cut of that same video just, I think, a few weeks ago. I've been on retatrutide since March 1st. March 1st, I was 198 pounds. By May 1st, after I'd even taken a cruise vacation and everything with unlimited food and all that kind of stuff. By May 1st, I was 175. So if I'm looking thin these days, blame the Retta. I'm feeling thin, but I also like having a flat stomach and stuff like that. It's been nice to just take off the weight with that. And this stuff, you can find it in a bunch of places through your doctor or otherwise. In any case, I highly recommend it. I've got a lot of people close to me now have jumped on the Retta. Yeah, it's totally game changing. So certainly something to consider if you have an unhealthy relationship with food. It's worth thinking about it. So yeah, like he says, that's it. Not really magic. Information all available online in tons of places. He does it with a full-time job, a family, and all the other obligations of life. And to make the time for it to change. Oh, we forgot the tan part. So basically get outside. Sunlight does wonders for all sorts of health markers. Absolutely right. We don't get a lot of sunlight up here in Vancouver, Canada. But when we do, it's great. He says, if you want the turbo version, buy some Melanotan 2 and follow the proper dosing protocol. You'll be darker than you've ever been in 2 weeks or less. So I don't know, you probably can't tell. I'm usually quite a pale guy. I'm a ginger by design or nature or origin, whatever you want to call it. And I've been using Melanotan 2 off and on for years, and I'm currently using it a little bit. It's an injectable melanin adjuster, if you will. You take it, it's got a very short half-life, and you take it maybe 20 minutes before you hit the tanning studio, and it means you need to tan for much less time, and the tan is retained for much longer. So in a lot of ways, you could say it's safer than getting a deep tan through repeated sun exposure. And it just makes it easier. It's highly optional. It has some other side effects too. Makes you a little hornier, that kind of stuff. But TMI, I know. But yeah, this is a great thread Ian put together here with a lot of practical advice for natties and for people that are a little more inclined to be not so natty. But it really resonated with me because notice I didn't say I resonated with it, which I effing hate. That's not the way you say that. Millennials screwed the language. It resonated with me because it was so identical to the advice I give out. I think he's got a lot more weight on him than I do, good weight, and he looks better than I do. But still, we're doing roughly the same thing. He's just getting better results. So anyways, thank you, Ian. Again, that's Ian Ironhands57 on Twitter. If you're on Twitter and want to follow someone that seems to dispense good advice. I don't know him personally, but yeah, give it a follow. All right. Thanks again for watching. Like I said, recently we're closing in on 7,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I think we are closing in on 700,000 watch hours or 700,000 views. That's what we're closing in on, which is pretty cool. Yeah, please subscribe, comment, forward this, share this, that kind of stuff. Okay, take care.